Okay, if you are a guest with us or coming back after a little while, just very quick housekeeping what we're doing. We're in this series You Asked For It that's going to run through the end of the year, and these are all topics submitted by people who are in this ministry, in this class, and we've got a lot of different topics, but the month of June is specifically about dating and conversations we need to have before marriage, hence the Before I Do title. Today, it's an interesting day to come. If this is your first time here, we're talking about the person you should dump. I don't know if you have someone like that in your life, but maybe we can help you out here. Just kidding. But last week we talked about the person you should date. So we talked about these are the qualities in a person that you should run to. These are the qualities that would make a really good spouse. Today is obviously the opposite of that. This type of person will probably not be a good spouse. There's just too much evidence to present that to be true. But I will say, if you are dating someone, and not necessarily today, but down the road, and you start to see some of these qualities, don't run right away. Have a conversation with them, but be very aware of what you're dealing with, because people will try to cover things up in the beginning to impress you, and as time goes on, once they feel like they've kind of sold the deal, they don't try as hard, and these things begin to surface. So I'm not advocating if you see this right away to end the relationship, but be very aware of it, address it, and if it doesn't change, I then would say you need to end that relationship. But as we get started, this is a question for y'all. What do you think keeps people from ending a relationship long after they should? What keeps them from doing that? Yes, ma'am.
One thing, it could be family, like kids are not old enough to understand why.
Okay. What else? Well, anyone else in class? It's a good answer. Okay.
Was it sinking cost? We were like, oh, I've already spent this much time or energy.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is coming from the guy who wants to see their tax returns from last week. But yeah. Somebody else. Yes.
Incorrect belief that things will get better.
Okay. Yeah, things will just naturally improve. That's a good one. Yes, ma'am.
People are more scared of being alone than not than dealing with something that they necessarily may not like.
Yeah. So I don't like being by myself, but I know this person's not right for me, but which one's worse? Isolation or being in a troubled relationship? Troubled relationship. But, yeah, that's a big reason. One more.
The spouse telling you that, oh, we're going to improve and make changes to the life.
Failed promises, yeah. Okay. So just for a context here, this is before dating. Now, some of these things do apply into marriages that end up dissolving, but I'm talking about dating from the immediate context, but not necessarily just for dating. But I would say these are kind of the big reasons why in a dating relationship, why they keep that relationship going longer than they probably should. They wonder, how do I have this conversation, right? If I'm going to sit down and talk with them, what is that conversation going to look like? What's it going to sound like? Back to this point over here, what if I don't find someone else? Like, what if I'm dumping the only person that will ever date me or the only person I'll ever run across? Is it really worth ending the relationship because I may end up single the rest of my life, which you probably won't, but that's what you think at the time. What will others say about me? Now, for guys, this is a really big one. Will I be blacklisted? Okay. So, somebody who's a guy, what does that term mean, blacklisted? Good luck, yeah. He's going to have a terrible reputation, in the college environment. She's going to go back to her dorm. She's going to be crying. She's going to make up all these things about me that weren't true. And now I'm the villain on the whole wing or the whole hallway. Good news, that doesn't end at college. That happens after college too. I was poorly misrepresented. That's not really what happened. But there's a chance that people will believe that rumor, and then I won't be able to have another relationship. So all of these fears kind of work into people saying, I'm going to stay in this relationship longer than I should. I know it's not right, but I'm more afraid of what could come than what I'm dealing with right now. But what I want to share with you this morning, I'm calling it the 5 Ds of the person you should dump. If you see a few of these Ds or even one of these Ds that we're going to talk about, having this conversation, I think, gets a lot easier. Because you realize what you're dealing with. And the conversation may not be enjoyable at the time, but I guarantee you the life afterward is more painful than this conversation. And if you really think about these things, you may end up asking yourself, why didn't I have this conversation before? What took me this long? So here are the 5 Ds for the person that I should dump. Number 1, if they are a discourager in your life. That should seem obvious, but people stay in toxic relationships because they don't know any better when the other person is discouraging them the whole time. Now, let me ask you, how do we discourage each other in dating? What does that look like? So never celebrate your successes. Maybe there's a little bit of jealousy that works into that, and so they don't want to put you up on a pedestal because it highlights the things that they haven't accomplished in their life. If someone's from a little child had the dream, one day I want to be a doctor, a medical doctor. That takes a lot of time, takes a lot of preparation. And they may fall in love with someone in college who's like, I don't want to wait for you to finish school, or I don't want us to, have you not have income for another 8 years after we graduate. And I don't want you to do that. But that little girl or that little boy has had a dream of being a doctor since they were 7 years old. What are they going to do? Are they going to fulfill their dream, or are they going to cave to the desires of someone else? That's a discouragement. That's a discouragement. It would be better, obviously, if you were in a relationship with someone who said, hey, that's a goal you've wanted your whole life. Go after it. And I'll support you, whatever that looks like. But this should be obvious. If you find more encouragement from the people you aren't dating than the person you are dating, you should not be dating that person. And so many people are in this position and they don't admit it. Going back to kind of what we talked about last week, if you think about your perfect day, if that person's not in your perfect day, they don't need to be your spouse. This is kind of like that. If you enjoy being with your friends more than the person you're dating, why are you dating them? The person you're dating should be the person that you enjoy being around the very most. All right, so D number 2, you got discourager. Number 2 is a disparager. What's the difference between a discourager and a disparager? Okay, this is going to be on discouragement. Discouragement is I'm not going to support you in what you want to do. Disparagement is I'm going to actually insult you or tear you down for wanting to do that to begin with. And so they're similar, but disparagement is worse than discouragement. Yet there are a lot of relationships full of disparagement where people are talked down to, where they are criticized, where they're made fun of, whatever it may be. You're familiar with this verse in Ephesians 4:29. This is just talking about relationships within the church. But Paul says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building up others according to their needs. If there's any relationship in the world where that should be true, it should be a dating relationship or a marriage. Don't be in a relationship, a close relationship with someone who makes you feel worse about yourself. It's not healthy. It's not sustainable. It's not what God wants for your life. So if you're disparaged, run from the relationship, because one day your spouse is supposed to be your biggest friend and your greatest supporter. And this is just a little bit of armchair psychology for you, but this is true. If they put others down, now let's not talk about they may not be putting you down directly, but if you're in a group and you hear them put other people down, make fun of other people, that is a sign that they have an extremely low self-esteem. And eventually, that's going to pour over to you. You're going to be that person who's made fun of. It's kind of like dealing with someone who's a gossiper. Like if someone comes up to you and says, have you heard about such and such? No. Do you want to hear about it? You should say, well, no, I'd rather hear about it from them. But you need to make a mental note. I'm never going to tell that person anything. Because they're out talking about other people. If they're out talking about other people, they're going to do that to me. If you're in a relationship with someone who puts someone else down in the room, they will eventually do that to you. Will pour over to you because that is a sign of extremely low self-esteem. Okay, number 3. We got discourager, we got disparager, deceiver. Same question. How does deception work into dating? Okay, so that was one thing that I had on my list too. Money issues, whether it be how much debt you have or how many expenses you've taken on that they don't know about. someone who's trying to put out an image they can't afford, or you date them for 6 months and you find out, oh, like you still live with your parents and have no intentions of moving out of your parents' house. That's kind of good to know. That's deception. How about this one? Like lying about where you are. Hey, I'm going to go to Starbucks and then I'll meet you at dinner. And then you ask them, well, what'd you get at Starbucks? And they're like, oh, I didn't go to Starbucks. I thought you said you're going to Starbucks. Oh, yeah, my plans changed. We talked about this a little bit last week. Once or twice that happens, hey, that's life. If you find them not being totally truthful about things over and over and over again, you can't trust that person. You just can't. And if they can't be trusted in small things while you're just dating, how in the world can they be trusted in the really big things? Jesus says this word for word, Luke 16:10. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. Dating relationship, very little. Marriage relationship, much. That's just who they are as a person. And kind of said this already, but if you can't trust them in the tryout stage while you're dating, you're definitely not going to be able to trust them once they've made the team. Once you're married, they don't care as much anymore. It's all about the tryout. And if they don't have a good tryout, you don't want them on your team. Number 4, distractor. This one's a little bit easier maybe to define, but how can a dating relationship distract us? Family, okay. What else? Have you ever heard someone say, it's interesting, when they started dating that person, it's just like they lost themselves. You ever heard that phrase before? They lost themselves? What does that phrase mean? When someone says it's like they lost themselves. Not the same person. Not the same person. You know, people have said things like, they used to be so adventurous, and now it's like they're a stick in the mud. Or they used to be so friendly, and now they're so withdrawn. Or have you ever known people that they're always around until they start dating somebody, and then once they start dating somebody, you never see them again? Like friendships collapse, friendships fall apart. It's probably not them. It's probably the person they're dating has become a real distraction in their life, and not in a good way. And then obviously there's the physical side of this, that you start dating, and as feelings grow and attraction grows, you may be in a relationship with someone who wants to go one step further than you should go to maintain your purity. I mean, there's many different ways that someone can be a distractor in a relationship. But Paul would say in Philippians 3:14, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Anyone who distracts you from that goal or that prize is not worth it. I know that sounds harsh, but I think that's what that verse says. Because earlier in that chapter, he says, I've given up a lot to be able to know Christ. And those other things I don't value nearly as much as I value knowing Christ. If the person you're dating distracts you from pursuing God, they aren't worth it. Unless they end up changing. And we addressed that a little bit last week. Sometimes that happens. And when that happens, praise God. But most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time they have a bigger impact on you than you have on them. Last one, just kind of self-explanatory. If they're a discourager, if they're a disparager, if they are deceitful, and if they are a distraction, they're a dead end. They just are. I mean, why would you want to stay in a relationship like that? Unless you want to be miserable. Purpose for dating is to discover if someone's a good fit for a spouse. And if they are not a good fit for a spouse, stop dating them. You're wasting time, you're wasting money, you may end up hurting your reputation in the process. Move on. Move on. Now, back to kind of where we began, this is a hard conversation to have, and people kind of put this off because they say, I don't know how to have that conversation. What if I don't find anyone else? Will I get blacklisted? Will I get criticized? I want to end with this perception. This is kind of the right view of a breakup. The right view of a breakup, if you handle it while you still have time before you get married. The conversation may not be real enjoyable, but what you're doing is you're providing them and you're providing yourself the chance to find happiness and love. I finished a great book recently about leadership. The book's called Traction, and this guy is a business consultant. He works with businesses about change management issues and HR issues, and he kind of used this analogy with firing someone. He's like, a lot of employers don't want to fire someone because they're afraid of how that employee is going to respond, or how other workers in the organization will respond, or what type of conflict it'll create within the company. And he basically said the same thing. He said, look at it as an opportunity to provide your employee a chance to thrive somewhere else. Like, you're not getting the job done here. We've addressed this already. And so rather than you keeping a job that you hate and me keeping you in a job that I don't want you to have, I'm going to give you the opportunity to go elsewhere and to find where your talent really is. You're actually doing them a favor. And a breakup, same way. If it's not working out, don't stay in the relationship. You're giving yourself the opportunity to find true love and happiness, and you're giving the other person the opportunity to find true love and happiness. And that can't happen if you both stay in that relationship you should not be in. Just can't happen. People say, I don't want to be mean. Well, don't be mean. It's only mean if it's handled in a mean way. If handled with grace, you're doing themselves a favor. And in those conversations, less is more. Like, tell them why you're doing it so they don't leave there thinking, well, what in the world did I do? But don't belabor the point either. Hey, I really respect you as a person. I really value our friendship. But for these reasons, boom, 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 I don't think we need to date each other anymore. We've talked about this already. I don't see it getting any better. So I want you to find someone else to be with, and I'm going to do the same thing. And we're going to value each other and respect each other and go our separate ways. Conversation over. It doesn't need to be a 3-hour meeting. It doesn't need to be awkward. It's just to the point. Respect them and go your separate ways. So back to that again, if you didn't get it. 5 Ds for the person I should dump. Discourager, disparager, deceiver, distractor, dead end. Give you an illustration. I'm a car guy, so it's a business example without emotion. But in year 2000, which was before y'all were born, unfortunately, for most of you, or a few of you, I guess. So in year 2000, there was 2 very well-known car lines y'all both know. Daimler, which is Mercedes, that's their corporate name is Daimler, and Chrysler, which you're familiar with Chrysler, American-made car. In 2000, Daimler and Chrysler merged, became one company. And when they made that decision, both companies took a massive hit in profits. Because what happened was the Mercedes customer didn't really like the cheaper model car in the Chrysler. And then the Chrysler customer couldn't really afford the Daimler prices, or they would have been buying a Mercedes to begin with. And so you had 2 really good automobile manufacturers that diluted their product by joining up with someone they shouldn't have been with. You tracking with me? And I think the same is true with human relationships. Guy A, girl A, may be incredible people, but that doesn't mean they need to be in a relationship. They may find someone else that's a better fit. Okay, next week we're going to talk about conversations you need to have before marriage. And these have been qualities, attributes. We're going to actually talk about the conversations next week. And then the last week in this series is going to be red, not yellow flags, like blinking, danger, don't go another mile. Like, this is where I got to get out of this thing. Okay, hope you all have a great day. Hopefully see you tonight. Thanks.